if you're not augmenting your marketing teams by now, you're kind of going to lose this foot race. There's going to be these companies that come up in all of the sectors. Like we've talked to brands that are in cremation services, to insurance, to like B2B SaaS. Like it's across the spectrum that this is being used.
Welcome to the DesignRush podcast. I'm your host, Bianca Mayer. Today, we're thrilled to have Cody Schneider with us, a pioneer in the AI industry and co-founder of Swell AI. Cody's journey intertwines with technology, entrepreneurship, and innovation, offering deep insights into AI's impact on content creation and digital marketing. Now, before we jump in, remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more insightful discussions with leading figures in the tech world. Now, let's get started and give a warm welcome to Cody to the DesignRush podcast. Alrighty, Cody. So thank you so much again for joining us today and for making the time to sit with us in the DesignRush podcast.
Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
Of course. Okay, so Cody, I'd like to just start off the podcast by, us and the audience getting to know you a little bit better. So Cody, could you start by briefly introducing yourself to our listeners and, just describe your current role and what it entails in the realm of AI and technology?
Yeah, for sure. So right now we're building this company called Swell AI. We spun like a side project out of it called Draft Horse AI, but Swell is kind of the current focus. It's really built, like what we're building is trying to create content repurposing powered by AI. So I can make long form content just like this podcast and then chop it up into all these bite-sized pieces for all the channels that I'm trying to do distribution through. This is this really awesome use case for AI. And so that's why we're kind of obsessed with it. Background wise, I worked in e-com and then B2B marketing agencies, and then ended up in B2B SaaS in the Valley. And there I helped take a company from $20 million valuation to $120 million valuation in about 6 months, using really the techniques of basically building content engines. And so that's kind of where we ended up now, because that process that we were doing at that company, I needed a team of 10 to 15 people. And we're like, oh, cool. We can now do this with like a single person when they're augmented by these AI tools. And so that's really what we're trying to build and trying to put into the public's eye. So
amazing. Okay, so that all sounds extremely exciting. Okay, so just before we continue on this path of AI and all of that stuff, as you've obviously just described, a big part of your business is, talking a lot about generative AI. So I'd like to know, Cody, when was the moment that you realized like, oh my God, this is going to change the world for good?
Yeah, I think, so we were all experimenting with it, but it really became the aha moment for everybody that I know was kind of in July of 2022, especially on the written side. There was kind of this, you could see stuff that was happening on the image generation that was before that. But really on the written side, the AI got good enough right about July of 2022. And so all of my kind of peers that were working in these early stage companies, we were all doing like experimenting with it. And so then we started building out basically these workflows that were involved with it. So kind of the first one that I hacked together, and I'm not super technical. I always joke, I'm like, I'm a script kiddie that turned into a prompt jockey, but the first version of it was basically a programmatic SEO writer. And so built this Python script that basically wrote like thousands of articles in hours, and then published those to all of these blogs that we owned that were in specific niches to sell software products that we also owned as well. And so kind of fast forward, I was doing consulting for a company at that time. And that's actually the origin of Swell. We were doing a podcast for them because we realized that for early stage brands, it's like an incredible way to 0 to 1 of brands. If you're trying to get your entire target audience to know that you exist, just make a podcast where you talk to industry experts every week, and then email your entire ICP that like podcast episode. And we've seen like it's a cold email, right? But the open rates on these things are like 40%. The click-through rates are like 5%. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's really because like people don't, like you're adding value by giving the podcast to them. So they don't look at it as being this like marketing tool, but in reality, that's what it is. And that's what's happening. But sorry, totally digress there. But that was kind of, the origin of when we saw all of this start to happen. again, it became good enough, and now it's getting it's if you're not augmenting your marketing teams by now, you're kind of going to lose this foot race. There's going to be these companies that come up in all of the sectors. Like we've talked to brands that are in cremation services, to insurance, to like B2B SaaS. Like it's across the spectrum that this is being used. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I keep telling people is like there's a huge disruption moment that's occurring, and like that new shaking up because of this base technology it's creating this massive opportunity for founders in particular. So
100%. Okay. So, I mean, look, there's a lot to unpack with regards to all of that. Okay. But let's first start by talking a little bit more about, building businesses through AI concepts at scale. Now, we're obviously very eager to hear your thoughts on this because you're basically an expert in this field. So, considering some of the recent trends, that's showing the growing role of AI content creation and how it's evolving, how do you actually see AI evolving in this space?
Yeah, totally. So I think the a couple of things that are really starting to come to the forefront. I'm seeing all founders and really C-suite individuals are thinking, how do I create a personal brand? More and more, and we have clients that actually use Swell AI in particular for this, where they interview these individuals, whether they're founders or C-suite. Like once a week, they sit down for an hour, they take that content, and then they basically are ghostwriting for them, right? So they make clips, they make tweets, they make LinkedIn posts, etc., across all platforms. They'll make newsletters, and they basically are managing that for them. So, in kind of like pairing that together with this idea of people are all trying to figure out, how do I make AI sound like me? And so I think that's the thing that we've been focusing on a lot lately and have seen the most feedback from customers from is like, we're trying to basically, the AI writes to the middle of the bell curve, it writes to the average. And so that's how you get this kind of, I call it like internet language. The data sets that it's trained on is like largely just like what's on the internet, and a ton of the content, especially in English, that's on the internet is like old British English, because there's a huge amount of open source content that's written like by India in particular. And so by specifying like, hey, like giving it, for example, source documents, and then asking it, okay, define the tone, style, and voice of this thing that we've written previously. And that then allows you to go and create this, we're calling it like a AI, just how you would, like if you were a marketing org in the past and you had a brand style guideline, where it's like, hey, here's how we use the logo, here's the color hex codes, here's the language that we use, etc. We're seeing companies more and more define these AI style guides as well, which then allows their teams to be using the AI, but producing outputs that, 9 times out of 10 are on brand and sound similar in that tone, style, and voice. And so these are the things that we're really thinking about and trying to like explore, and then also have the ability to like save those inputs as templates, so that in the future these companies can, they just come into these softwares and all of that kind of knowledge of how they're trying to sound is pre-saved. So any of the outputs that they generate with these tools is basically being created, right? So I can have a team of 5 people, they can be working remotely, and I'm always going to get the same, kind of on-brand outputs that we're looking for. So those are some of the trends that we're starting to see like become more prevalent, especially over like the last 2 months in particular.
Okay, so just on that note, actually, I like that whole idea of like how to make the AI sound more like me, right? I mean, I think most of us that do content use AI basically on a daily basis to streamline our processes, right? But in saying that, how far off do you think we are from actually being able to create like our own personalized AI that actually does have our content sound like us?
Yeah, I think we're super close. I mean,
Yeah.
the easiest way to do this is just record a like 5-minute video of you talking about a subject or a topic that you're an expert in. Take that transcript and then just ask the AI, like, what is the tone, style, and voice of this? And like, as an individual, you can like in 5 minutes have this basically style guide for yourself, so that the content that you produce in the future is coming out. So like, for me, a lot of the times what I get is like, it's an irreverent, casual tone that is, attempting to be helpful. So then I can incorporate that right into like all of the documents that I'm having it reproduce. And so with that, what this allows then is like, I can take, these long form pieces of content. And then I say, hey, I want you to repurpose this into, we're going to write 30 tweets, right? With key takeaways that are related to marketing. But I want you to write it in this tone, style, and voice that we just defined with the transcript that I input previously. So when I'm talking about like that, like AI style guide that people are starting to create, that's what I'm referencing. Is like, what is this? And you can do it at the individual level. So like for you as a creator, but you can also do that at the brand level. So if you have a team of people that are working, they're all working off that same document so that output is consistent across the organization.
You see, this is why I love speaking to people who are experts in AI, because there's like these simple yet really powerful tips that you get from working with AI. It's so multifaceted that even the simplest prompt can actually like really take it to the next level. Okay, so in saying all of that, how do you think that tools like Draft Horse AI, for instance, will change the landscape of content creation?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing this already happen so quickly. An example that I just saw this case study they released, it was like 2 weeks ago, but a company basically took a competitor's sitemap of their entire website. So imagine every post that company has ever written, like blog post. And it was, the site is 10 plus years old, had been ranking for years. And then they extracted all of the titles from all of those blog posts. So imagine there's like 2,000 of them. And then they took all those titles and had AI write their own versions of that same content that was ranking. And within 12 months, they were doing 1 million impressions per month on Google and getting around 140,000 clicks per month on Google. And from a execution standpoint, they completed all of that work within 4 months. It was a team of, I think, 2 people that actually did that. So right now it's a land grab is what I keep saying. And the reason for that in the kind of way to visualize and think about this is if I wanted to write 1,000 articles previously that were SEO optimized and focused on these target keywords that had high value related to my brand, each of those articles, if I wanted them to be like pretty good quality, would cost around $100, right? So 1,000 articles, $100. I'm going to spend $100,000 to write all that content. The moment that's come now and what's changed is that I can write those 1,000 articles for 50 cents a piece, right? So it's going to cost me $500. Even if the article like only makes one lead, especially if I'm a B2B SaaS with a higher like customer lifetime value or something with a larger ticket item or even e-commerce. So this all it doesn't really matter. It's so cheap that even if it just produces one like sale, it pays for itself. It pays itself back immediately, right? And so that's kind of this moment that we're in. So fast forward, right? We're 2 years from now, and everybody has written all the content that they could possibly write. It's ranking in all these places, but they're only writing from the general knowledge of the LLM, right? So again, when we were talking previously about the average, they're writing to the center of the bell curve. So all the content that you get is going to be just like the general knowledge that the AI has. So in the future, what's going to happen and why we're focusing on Swell and this is where we see this going is if I want to write a piece of thought leadership content, like I'm going to go and I'm going to interview 5 people that are experts in that field, whatever that is. I'm going to take those transcripts and I'm going to say, hey, AI, like this is your walled garden of knowledge that you can only pull information from. Now, I want you to go write this blog post about, say it's something related to like hotel marketing or whatever, right? And it's going to then use its general writing knowledge. It's going to write your tone, style, and voice, but it's going to only use that information that you provided it from the transcripts of the experts that you talked to. And that's how you're going to create like content differentiation in the future. This is going to be the only way to do it. Just because all of these like AI writing tools are becoming so accessible to like bulk, shotgun content into the world. And so that domain knowledge that these experts have and that your organizations own is going to become more and more valuable. So that like library of content that you can go back to and you can basically data mine to extract all of this, this information from. That's going to be the way that you can differentiate as an organization when it comes to content marketing, when the general AI is just, producing all. And we see this already, right? So it's like an example of this is there's so many LinkedIn accounts right now that are just AI generated. Like I do YouTube videos on this all the time of like, here's how you can do exactly what this person's doing. Like it's like a full carousel, right? That was made in 2 minutes using Canva and like AI generated content. And then the ideas in it aren't super interesting. But if I do that same process, but the source material I provide is from an expert that has been like, say they have their own data that they're working off of, or they're they're on the front lines, it's going to be a way more interesting output that the AI actually provides using that general knowledge and using that same process, but just giving it like more valuable source material. So yeah, I'm that's like where I see all this heading, and like how all but like to take a step back with all of this like SEO generated content right now, again, I think it's a land grab. It's going to become like, I'm doing this more and more, and we're talking to more, like you probably are having the same experience. I'm going to like Chat GPT or an AI assistant to ask it questions more often now than I am to Google, just because it's like the content that I get on Google just is not valuable in the same way. And so I think I have to remind myself that like I live in a bubble, right? And like my mom isn't doing that. My grandmother is definitely not doing that. And so that adoption is going to take a way longer period. But that is kind of where this all heads. For like general information, you're going to go to one of these chatbots. For domain knowledge that is like expertise, you maybe will go to Google, but you're probably going to look for, okay, who's somebody that's interviewed all of these experts, and then kind of organize that information. So.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, once again, there's quite a bit to unpack there. But first of all, I did want to ask you this and see what your take is on this, right? How sustainable, or what do you think the longevity of this is? I feel like you kind of just explained that, to be honest, but like, I know that Google, for instance, strikes a lot of AI generated content. So do you think that this whole tactic that you've just explained to us all, which I think is brilliant, by the way, do you think that they will be still striking that? Or do you think that the fact that Google is kind of like having layoffs now as well, because they're embracing automation and going more towards like Bard and all of that stuff, like where do you think the longevity of AI generated content is?
No, it's a great question. Yeah, so Google released their AI content policy in February of 2023. The gist of it is basically, we don't care how the content is made as long as it provides value to the user. So I think that position is going to be kind of the universal position that people like land on across organizations, not just Google, but any of these other companies. And it makes sense, right? Like the whole point of us doing all this is like, does this provide value to the human that's reading it? If the answer is yes, then it's like, great, then it solves the problem. And that's really why we're here. I get asked this all the time, like, can AI content plagiarism checkers, like, we use that, we use them to make sure that we pass the test. And it's like, I have not seen one that is legitimate. And the reason for that is like, if you take AI content, you're just like change the tone, style, and voice so that it's like in American English written like a Californian, and is in a casual tone, like that blog post that just didn't pass, it will pass, right? So how can it know? And all of the white papers that we've seen and we've read, there's no confidence. I laugh about my younger cousins in college, and she's like, these people are psychos, like they think these things actually work. And I'm like, I know, like it's absolutely like it's a tool, it's mimicking human language. So you're basically saying that like human language like can't be like it's just very hard to differentiate, even for the AI to understand like what it wrote previously and what it hasn't. So with that said, I think the outputs, like people want it to sound human, and they want it, like good writing is good writing across the board. And I think the kind of average that we're seeing come out of AI isn't like perfectly good writing yet. And so that's like how we keep talking about it to our clients and kind of the companies that we're working with is like, typically like the inputs that you put, like 10% of the inputs and 10% of the outputs is like what your team is working on, right? That middle 80%, that's all the heavy lifting. Like that's where you let the AI do the work, right? It's like organizing, like for example, say it's a blog post you're writing, like, okay, here's this target keyword, like build me a content outline. Okay, now write that piece of content. Okay, cool. Like that process that used to take us 5 hours, that was just done in 3 minutes. And now my team comes in over the top and they're like, okay, I'm going to change this, and here's where we'll add this call to action. Here's these, these minor changes that will make to basically create this more human output that actually is trying to, is going to be more effective at accomplishing what the goal is of the company, right? Which is typically revenue. Like we're trying to get people to read this thing and then, do some type of action. So I don't think that. I don't think that it's going away. I think that it's going to morph and people are going to become more receptive to certain like tone, styles, and voices. But again, I think that's why that defining that as a business is going to be so critical within the next 6 months in particular. And then having that internal style guide of like, hey, this is how we sound, this is how we write. Yeah, we use this tool to assist us so that like we're more efficient, but we're not saying like don't do this whatsoever. Especially if the companies aren't saying we're not penalizing these organizations that are doing it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, I think at the end of the day, we all work with these AI checkers, which is basically just AI checking each other, right? So, I mean, we've also, even at DesignRush, we've agreed that it's so unreliable. Like it doesn't feel like there's much of a point to really use them that much. And obviously we, edits all of our stuff heavily to make it sound in our own tone of voice and everything. But I guess it's like a double-edged sword a little bit again. But yeah, at the end of the day, it is what it is. And I'm sure those will also get better eventually. But this also brings me to like my next point, and it kind of piggybacks on the previous question that I asked you. Now, I know a lot of SEO experts obviously stress that, websites relying on AI generated content tends to like experience a steep plunge, like at some points at least. And I think I've seen quite a few like graphs on LinkedIn that also indicate this. So what is your like take on that specifically? Like, how do you see this going for SEO as well?
Yeah. So I have blogs I own that are 100% human generated, that this last update got absolutely slapped. Like they just got clapped. And in contrast, I have entirely AI generated sites that were launched in like August that are doing, I think one of them here, I can look at the search console right now and actually give you a real number, but this one was doing like, I think around 1,000 clicks per day, wow, and gets like 20 ebook downloads. And then that goes into an email nurture campaign. And it's the whole campaign for that is basically to upsell telehealth services. And that is just like a business that's now running, right? And we have a partner that we're like associated with that is creating this inbound leads for them. So I don't think I think it's just like all the updates in the past, like you don't really know what's going to happen. Yeah, and it's again just the data that I've seen just off of our own sites is that AI content, like it can rank and it cannot. And like these sites they're like all the signals, like the one that's I just described that's doing like 1,000 clicks per day now. All the signals for that site look like it's AI generated, right? Like we published 20,000 articles over a 30-day period. Like we just like found all the long tail keywords related to the niche that they're in. It's like related to women's health. We then went and we published 20,000 articles that are related to that. I mean, it's a healthcare site, right? Like that should be like number one, that should be not ranking with AI content, but it is. And this is like the test that we've been running because we're just curious to see how this is going. But yeah, again, I've seen both sides of it. I've seen kind of all pieces of it. I've seen like AI sites get clapped. I've seen them succeed. I've seen entirely human written sites get clapped. I've seen them succeed. I've seen AI and human written sites, like combination sites, also get clapped and succeed. So there's no rhyme or reason. What I think for us, how we think about it again, is like, is this providing the most value that we can to the user? If the answer is yes. And the other thing with this is that if I go and I look at the front page of Google for the target keyword that I'm actually trying to write this content for, and if I just mimic what is there on page one, like if I basically like take again what they're talking about on each of those top 5 ranking blog posts, make my own version of that, 9 times out of 10, like I can get that to rank as long as my domain authority is high enough, because it's like I'm being more exhaustive in my content and I'm consolidating all of the knowledge that's in those, and then you can scale that up, right? Like, so again, like that example we talked about earlier, where they went and they took a sitemap of a competitor and then they wrote content about every article that this competitor had written. You can do that exact same thing, but instead it's like, okay, I'm going to have, here's this list of target keywords. I go scrape the front page of Google for every one of those target keywords. I extract that data out, and I then write articles based off of that extraction. And like, this is all just, that's 4 API calls, and I have an article that's written and published on my website. So imagine that it's like I have 1,000 keywords and that whole process is occurring. You can create all this content that Google is already showing you signals. Hey, this is ranking already because here's these blog posts that are on page 1. So I'm going to create my own version of that, and that's how I can really like effectively and quickly get these sites to basically go live. So again, just the things that we're seeing. Another piece of information though that's related to this is the overall quality of the entire site we're finding to be more important than it was previously. So it's like, and we've actually done this with some of the sites, is like we've unpublished articles that we thought weren't super good or that got affected by the previous algorithm update. And what we found is by rolling those back or unpublishing them, it actually made the other pieces of content that were performing all right previously do better. And then so now we're going back and we're rewriting that content that was like okay to try to make it of higher quality, so that the overall like trust within the site is better. That's again when you're on kind of that like small or medium size scale. If you're a huge site, that's not going to really affect you as much. But
yeah, I mean, look, that's all pretty genius, and I'm learning a ton already. But I just quickly want to backtrack a little bit to something that you said earlier, and that's about like a whole bunch of AI generated health articles that was made, right? I just have to ask, like, isn't that really scary? Like that's ranking so high?
totally, like I'm of that opinion as well. Like for us, again, how I'm thinking about it is like what I just am trying to get data so I can talk about it and understand how it's functioning. The other side of it though is that like for that blog in particular, like a lot of the content that we're writing about is just like there isn't information really out there that was already published, right? So like a bunch of the keywords were just like non-competitive keywords that didn't have like even an article that's written about it. And so the AI that it's writing, like, and we've had them audited, just like some of the highest performing ones by like industry professionals, just to get like, what's the quality score that you would give this? And they're like, yeah, it's like a 7. And we're like, okay, well, like that's better than nothing. And it's like, if it is providing some type of value and pointing them at least in a direction, to us, that's like, kind of an overall win. But I personally, I'm so like more and more, I'm like, the internet is all fake. I'm the reason it's fake. Get offline, delete your social, right? Like my ongoing mantra for 2024 will just be delete your social, because it's all about to get so messed up. It's just a random thing. Sorry to digress, but like we just saw this demo like 4 weeks ago where they basically took like influencers and they made a digital copy of them. And then you could buy like an influencer post, but the influencer didn't even have to like hire a photographer to like go with like do like a product shoot. They just like, basically put that product in with that influencer. And like now they have this post that they could post like onto their, Instagram as an example. And like it looks like that person, like it's in the style that they all like they would normally wear, but they just trained on their back catalog data set for how do they look and how to, et cetera. And when you think about that of like, oh, like this influencer, I mean, they could just have public pricing. Basically, if I'm a brand, I just go, I buy, I pay $500, and now my product is being, maybe there's some type of a filter there, like we don't want to do certain items. But if it's like a skincare product or whatever, like they're just like, yeah, okay, go for it. But they don't even have to hire or do anything. it just happens, right? And it was this company that's basically pitching this, like a way for influencers to basically do these brand deals like way more effectively. And so, yeah, like that is the future that is incoming. I mean, you probably have seen all of the stuff with like these they're just like digital, entirely digital influencers. Like there's one out of Barcelona right now that's just like going viral everywhere, where she is basically like a stable diffusion port. So they've like made a version of her. And there's like people that are subscribing to like her OnlyFans, right? Which is insane. And she's making like 20 grand a month with this, but it's like, this is not a real person. It's so messed up. And then they're like, yeah, we're going to do a chatbot on top of that. It's like absolutely like the world where it's going. I'm like, okay, that side of it, I'm so scared for, but simultaneously there's like all this business like use cases. So anyways, I don't know. It's like, I feel like it's like all technology. There's good and bad that comes with everything. So at least that's what I tell myself.
Like, yeah, well, I mean, I guess you kind of have to. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's just so crazy. I don't know. Sorry, this is also a little bit off topic, and we are, getting closer to an hour. But I just have to quickly mention this very quickly. But I do remember there was like a pretty old movie called Sim 1, and it had Al Pacino in it, and he had like this whole AI like actress that nobody knew was an AI actress, but like she was the best and everybody absolutely loved her, but it was just like Al Pacino behind this woman, And that movie really stayed with me. Like, I don't know a lot of people that actually know that movie, but it really stayed with me. And you just talking about all of this stuff and like having, an AI becoming an influencer. I mean, behind that AI influencer is someone, doing, all of that stuff. And that just leads me to thinking that AI will always probably need a person behind it to drive whatever it needs to, or whatever we want it to do, right?
Yeah. I think the highest quality will always have human intervention.
Exactly.
Like it's where the magic comes from, in my opinion. But like with that said, like we're seeing these people that are just like spinning these up as side projects, right? Where it's like, okay, like Stable Diffusion makes this image and then it goes and it automatically schedules it to like an Instagram scheduling app. And like AI writes this Instagram caption that's in the tone, style, and voice of, this person that they're artificially creating. Okay, now let's do like 100 of those and see what happens, right? But when you look at the highest performing ones, like Lil Miquela's one, she's been around for like a while, but that's like a design team that's behind her, right? They're also doing like AI music for her. It's actually crazy. But I think where this goes and what's actually super exciting for brands is like previously I used to go and I would do brand deals, right? I would do these with these influencers, but I'm always like, say, I work with this actress, and then something comes out that she has like a sweatshop in Southeast Asia, and you're like, shit, we just signed this contract, but now we're gonna have to break that, and there can be negative outcomes when you're working with humans. Like now, hypothetically, like a brand could own this like digital influencer, and they're always perfect, but like what I think Lil Miquela their team has done really effectively is they've created like almost drama within her group of friends. So there's like 5 of them, right? And there's this drama that's happening. But like imagine a brand doing that, right? Where it's like a brand has like these 5 different influencers and there's drama that's happening within that. So you create almost this own little world that like your audience could live and exist in. And so I think that these, like, we're just on the precipice of like where this all goes, but more and more, I mean, you're going to see agencies over the next like 2 years start to crop up. That's like, hey, like we do influencers for brands. Like you're an e-com store. Like you pay us $5,000 a month and we create this artificial influencer. And like, we're going to go and grow basically grow this influencer to sell your products. And you just think about it like it's brand deal like you would do previously, except you're going to own that digital person indefinitely, and they're going to create inbound for you indefinitely. And there's like even further versions of that where they're now taking these people and they're making like digital avatars, and then they have their own YouTube channels and they're like doing like makeup tutorials, like it's actually insane. And I'm like, so yeah.
It's like the next level of mascots, really.
100%. Yeah. It's a super interesting way to think about it, actually. Because traditionally we'd make them like the cartoon figures, but like now it's like people are most receptive. we're actually seeing this within the content as well too, of like what content is going the most viral on platforms. Like we get this question all the time, like, is it better for me to do like, I take a podcast and I make the the video branded and it has captions and it has like a cool background that's like the color scheme of the company. And if you take the same clip and you make it look like it's native to the platform, like it's like, put on YouTube Shorts, these captions are made by YouTube Shorts, right? If you do those side by side, the one that looks like it's native and like authentic is going to go more viral every time. Like I've never seen one of these like overly curated ones do less. And so if we take that same idea and think about it like, okay, like I'm going to have this, digital influencer, of course it's going to go more viral. Of course it's going to do better at marketing this product because that's what people are most receptive to currently from a content standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. But this also brings me to another point that I wanted to bring up, right? I've had a few conversations now with other, thought leaders in branding and design and all of that stuff, right? And the one thing that consistently comes up is like authenticity, right? Now, I'm really racking my brain to try and figure out like where do we then now stand? Because we're at the precipice of a world that's like on the edge of really going full on into AI if it hasn't already, and it actually really has, and it's just going to get more in the next coming years, as I'm sure you can agree. Like, where are we going to find the balance between, AI generated content and still being authentic? Because that's something that consumers consistently want. They want authenticity. So where do we stand really? Like, what the hell are we doing?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the classic like why do corporations hire influencers, right? It's because they have more of a connection with their audience than they do, right? More trust is built into that. I saw this stat last week. I still am shocked by it, but it was like I think it was like 90% of searches that Gen Z do for like knowledge or like information is on TikTok. And they it was 90% didn't trust Google and like 70% of searches were on TikTok for like information. And so they're using TikTok as their search engine for knowledge, right? Which is just like, to me, I'm like, holy, like what? So let's break that down. Like, what does that mean? Like what they're basically saying is like this, when sources of information come from like a random like place, they have less trust than it's like, here's a physical human being that's telling me this thing and like I can see their face. So there's like more trust that's built into that for that generation because they assume that everything on the internet is fake, basically, right? But if you're a person, there's more repercussion for if it's like not fake. So I'm just imagining that, okay, if I'm a brand, like I have this digital influencer and they're like promoting this content and this like Gen Z is going and they search on TikTok for XY, skincare for, hormone-based acne or something like that, right? This like digital person comes up and talks to me about it. If that, like, you can tap into that natural effect that's happening. Is that authentic? Is that real? I don't know, but I know that like on those platforms, you're not going to go viral or not going to get any reach, like unless you're having like a person, give that information and talk about it. And so it's almost like meeting the consumer where they are, like, and also like creating content that again feels native to that platform. Like what's right for LinkedIn is different for Instagram, is different for TikTok, is different for YouTube Shorts, etc. And so, I don't have a good answer though. I'm just like you, I'm like, I don't know where this is headed. Like what?
I mean, it's a lot to think about. It really is because yes, okay, it's two of the main things that a lot of people are talking about is like, AI and the super like artificial way of generating content, pushing content out there, analyzing things, doing research, as you've even mentioned as well. And then also like trying to strike that balance with being real, right? It's interesting. I guess it's time that's going to tell, where we're really going to head with regards to that. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's too soon to really say. Let's be honest, people have only really started to push like AI or start using AI this year, right?
100%.
So we're still really in baby phases with regards to like where we're going to go with this, but it is
100%.
Interesting to ponder.
Yeah, I think what people are uncomfortable with too, typically that's a signal that it's going to go that direction, is like my experience. So if people are saying, hey, I'm comfortable with this AI generated, mascot, I have strong feeling that that's going to absolutely happen, especially if it's cheaper than what I was doing previously, right? Like that's always the economic component of this is typically the driver within all of this. Like, why are we, again, to go back, like $100,000 so there's 500. What are you going to choose when you're writing SEO content? Like, I'm going to choose the 500 every time, right? And if it's, I can do an Instagram influencer post for whatever, we'll say 25 grand, or I can do it for $25. Like, where am I going to go? I'm going to do $25 every time. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I can imagine a world definitely becoming like that. But I mean, seeing as we are talking about like branding and personal branding and stuff like that now, that really gives us a little segue into, the next segment that I want to talk to you about. Now, personal branding is obviously a very intricate thing. And obviously, with your experience in AI and everything, you can really give us some idea, right? But first of all, before we dive into that, I just want to ask you to imagine, like, for an average employee, like, say, for instance, myself or Nick, our producer, or anybody, for anyone. For the average employee in an organization who really wants to, like, create a personal brand as part of his or her expertise, how can they do that with minimal effort?
It's such a good question. So first off, everyone should be doing this. It just gives you more leverage within your organization, and also if you're trying to go and negotiate with like a new company. So that's like number one. And we're starting to see companies care about this more and more. Like, oh, you have 20,000 followers on LinkedIn and you like do posts daily. They're like, yes, we want to hire you, right? Especially if you're in the marketing space. So with that said, the workflow that we're seeing be the most effective is doing something like record on Riverside. I then take that output and I go into the script and I use studio sounds to basically make it so it has that kind of like higher quality sound. At that point, I then take the output, and this is actually where like Swell comes in and how we're seeing people use it. I upload that into Swell. I have all of these templates that are made for all the platforms that I'm trying to do distribution across. So like, for example, I have a template in Swell that's like, it finds basically 5 ideas from the conversation that I just had. I then will write 5 different LinkedIn posts about each of those ideas. So they're like individual, unique key takeaways that are expanded. I'll write 35 tweets. Again, it's just a template. I'll write a long form blog post. Again, it's a template and it's in that tone, style, and voice that I defined previously. And then it also will generate clips for all socials. And then those clips can be exported and put into your social media scheduling application. We're actually going to build that in long term, is what it's looking like more and more, just based off of what customer feedback is saying. So like you'll be able to schedule right from the application, but that's how we're thinking about it more and more, is it's like this personal branding, or that's one of the use cases, is like as a tool for these like people that are doing personal branding. But the best way I've seen to make content is just like even if it's you monologuing, like sit down for 20 minutes and talk about like, and honestly, I've done this before where I've just had AI interview me. Like, I want to talk about this topic, like ask me 20 questions, right? That are like, or what are 20 questions that I should ask the guest about related to this topic. And then I turn on a Loom video, or again, like turn on Riverside, and I just record myself having that conversation. And right there, I've got all the source material for me to base, as long as I am an expert within that space. But I have all of this knowledge that basically I can then capture and then repurpose across all those places. And we like, my friends just started this podcast called In Growth We Trust. I think they're like a top 10 marketing podcast now in the UK. But what I just described is exactly what they're doing. And it takes them 2 hours a week. So that's the entire process, to basically from like, getting source material to it's now out in the world. And so it's easy. Like traditionally, if we were having this conversation 2 or 3 years ago, that whole process would be like you could probably do it with like 3 VAs and like 1 manager type person. And now it's like a single individual can get all of that out the door in, again, 2 hours. So that's the moment that we're in with all this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds easy but tedious to me.
Totally. And a lot of times, like it's so funny. Like when the Philippines wakes up, like our like basically our heat map of usage just like goes crazy. So like we see all these VAs basically get on the platform that are using this software for other people. But again, it's like if I don't have to hire super skilled labor to accomplish this process, and like I had to previously, right? Like if I wanted to do that in the past, like it's like, okay, I need to hire a sound engineer and a video editor, and it's probably the same person. So they're going to do the final video output and create all the clips. I'm then going to like have somebody do that transcription. And maybe I use a service like rev.com or whatever to like produce that. Once I have the transcription, then somebody like a content writer is going to scour through that and like try to find like the interesting components of it. And then they'll write, and then maybe I have a copy editor that's over the top of that to like put the final touches on it. So again, like there's all these in that chain, that's just like so much work that's happening. And like the contrast is like if I give these AI tools like Swell AI to use an example, I give it this raw audio file or this raw video file that's an hour long, and 5 minutes later I have all that content generated. Like what? Like I then just schedule it and I'm good. Like that's it. That's my personal branding work for the week. I just I talked to a client last week, and I mean they're charging like $5,000 a month. It's just a solo founder. I think he has like 2 team members that work offshore for him. $5,000 a month to do this personal branding for like C-suite and founders. And I think right now he said he has like around 30-ish clients or something, and it's like a team of 3 people. So he's doing $150,000 like of throughput. It's agency work, but it's like this is what they're doing, and they can do this is what I'm really trying to say, because of all these tools existing. So it's kind of a renaissance for personal brands. But yeah, it's like create long form, like the formula for all content marketing that I try to preach is like create long form pieces of content, repurpose it to all channels that you're trying to do distribution through, automate and delegate as much of that process as possible. And like for most founders, like they can have it where it's, oh, I show up to this call for an hour a week, and like only an hour of my mental energy is focused on that thing during that period. And then it creates all this content that I then, output and put into the world. Of course I'll do that. Like it's a no brainer. And we're calling it like founder-led content marketing is like this future, because there's so much trust that's like built into that. Like if you're in a public eye, like it's so much easier to sell, especially if you have large social accounts, right? Like if I DM somebody with like 300 followers, the response rate that I'm going to get is going to be way less than when I DM somebody with 10,000 followers. And this is just like data that we've seen like throughout the growth of this company people are so much more receptive, because it's just this trust metric. It's total vanity, and it's total, it's like it's not real, and it can be like fabricated, like just by being present on the platform. But again, that's the leverage that we can create through this process of doing this personal branding content. So,
okay, so there's a few interesting things that you touched upon, and it's got me thinking. Right now, I don't know if you know this, but DesignRush, helps businesses, particularly like startups and SMEs, to like efficiently find the right agency partners for branding and marketing. And we have like a directory that's alongside like reviews and insights, and we help people make informed decisions on who their next partner is going to be. Right now, Cody, considering this like expertise of yours in like personal brands for business growth and stuff, like where do you see this going? Like how do you see this partnership relationship, or like the things that DesignRush maybe does, like how DesignRush works and stuff, like how do you see this changing agencies or agency relationships really in the realm of AI and stuff? Do you think people are still going to be going for agencies, or do you think that they're going to start doing this stuff by themselves?
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants done for you still. I don't think that's ever going to go away. It's just the cost constraints that previously existed are now being eroded, right? So I'll give you a real world example. There's this company called Boring Marketing. It's like an AI SEO agency. They are their whole branding is like from the beginning, like we use AI, like that's what we're doing. Like that's why we can do this as effectively as we are. So their base tier is $3,000 a month. I think they write like around like 20 to 30 articles a month for you. And then they are trying to optimize for like 100 keywords related to your brand. So that same package that used to cost $30,000 a month, but now it's 1/10 of the cost of what it was previously to get the same like impact to your company. if I'm a founder, like, of course I'm going to go buy that like over the other thing. So, and we've seen that, like I think it was called like Lemonade Studio. It was an SEO agency. They had to shut down in like July because they like so many clients had left from January. Like that was like, and largely what they were focused on was content writing. Like that was like the service they were brokering, right? Because they had all these experts, blah, blah, blah. And people were like, okay, well, I can just go get the same, almost 90% of the quality output with ChatGPT as what I was getting paying you. So why would I not go do that? For you guys, I think it's actually really interesting when it's like a marketplace it's doing kind of that middlemaning. I think that's actually going to become more and more valuable. It's like everything in like everything that's new, that's marketing related. There's just so much snake oil. So having a trusted expert to like be that bridge between like, oh yeah, this is like a vetted expert that actually knows what they're doing. I think that's always going to exist. I think that like agency work as we know it is going to be like, we're seeing this already, right? Like again, with like that AI SEO example, it's going to be disrupted. But what it's going to do is it's going to make it way more cost or less cost prohibitive for companies than it was previously. Like I can probably do way more client work for at that $3,000 a month price point. But in the past, it would be so much like overhead for me to accomplish that. Like the team that I would have to have, et cetera, would just be massive. So the AI is basically supplementing that team that was previously required. It's reducing that cost that was previously required. It's also speeding up the time that I can get this out and like in public. But those are kind of the trends that we're seeing with all of this. I think that we get asked this all the time. Like, I just want a done for you service. Like can I get Swell, but like with like a VA over the top of it or like a team member? And for us, like we want to build software, so that's not our goal currently. Maybe that's something we do in the future. But I think people don't know how to use these. Like if you go into like a general LinkedIn group, right, that's like about AI, the questions that you see in there is like eye-opening of like where the average person is at of like just like capability to use these tools, right? Like I saw it. A friend sent me a screenshot of like a CEO asking, like, what programming language do I need to learn to like use ChatGPT, right? Like just like crazy. And so I think that gives perspective on like, there's still going to be companies absolutely that like want to use this, but instead of paying $30,000, they want to pay $3,000, but still get the same output that they were getting previously. So if you can bridge that gap, you're going to be, I mean, the PR agency or digital PR agency that I use to like book these podcasts, like that is literally what they're doing, right? Like that's a $30,000 service a month that they previously used to charge. And they're like, okay, cool. Like we can automate and augment all of this with AI. And now we can charge you like $3,000 a month to do the same amount of outreach and the same amount of placement that we did previously. So.
Now, I just have two more questions for you, okay, as we wrap up. Now, the first one being is just reflecting back on like your career so far, who would you say you respect the most in your industry at this moment? Or who have you learned the most from? And, do these people have personal brands as well, or are they maybe not really so much on social media or social platforms?
Yeah, that's a great. So one for sure is I used to work for him at a previous B2B marketing agency. His name's Jeff Reynolds. But I would say he probably doesn't have a personal brand. He's kind of that old guard, like if you know, and like he just prints money. So for him though, what he really taught was like how to do client relationships really effectively. And like that parlays into so much, like, especially when you're like starting software companies, like how do I create great experiences and like over communicate, sell internally, like those types of things. And because when you're working in an agency space, like that's really what you're doing is like, I'm doing marketing to the group that I'm like, I have to sell them constantly on these ideas that we're trying to get them to agree upon as North Stars that we can make their company, like, or their business grow more effectively. So anyway, so I think that like, that's probably one of the key people. He was really adamant about like brand in particular and like the value of like, that's actually how we create business value over time. One of the things he's always be like, is like, how many people are just looking for your name is like a great metric of like, does this brand have value? Like, are they just searching for that company name? And then just like measuring that with like Google Search Console as an example. It's like a super simple way to do this. But yeah, I think, I don't know. I think though that's probably the one that's been the biggest impact on my life that has, again, like close to zero presence. And kind of intentionally. I don't think he wants to be like, it's not his goal, right? He's also in a different part of his career, right? So it's less required. Like when you're younger, it's way more effective to like, and we've seen this I personally have seen this, like building that personal brand gives you so much leverage and trust if you're like in your earlier stages of your career. But yeah, I hope that was an all right answer to the question. It's actually a really good question, though. It's been one of the most interesting questions I've gotten asked on these, actually. So.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, and then lastly, just very quickly, because I know we need to wrap up, but just lastly, if you could go back in time, Cody, and give your younger self a piece of advice at the start of your career, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing I would have probably emphasized, like learning to program more effectively. The other, just because it's such a leverage point, but the other thing is just thinking about like what are like my first business that I started, we were like data mining public marketplaces and then basically spinning up e-commerce products that were like clones of bestsellers. Not a super long-term, like it was a great cash grab, but I wish I would have done more brand related stuff to that. Again, investing in that brand component, because that's again how you create this moat and create really like sustainable companies. So that would be kind of the biggest thing. Also, just like do the things that are obvious to you based on the data that nobody else is doing. I think I wish I would have accepted that. Like best practices are typically like, if you're hearing about them, they are already like that arbitrage is already exploited is kind of my philosophy. So it's like when you're on the front lines or like, we always joke, like when you're in the pit, like you see things that nobody is talking about. And that data that you have is going to probably help you make more effective decisions on like identifying marketing arbitrage and then capitalizing on it, like as quickly and as early as you can. But in the past, I think it's always like experts don't really know anything, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like people that are like, because if they're experts and they're talking about it, it like happened in a previous moment rather than like the current thing. They're just like, they're talking about a past thing rather than like what is going on right now. So, yeah.
So like as someone in your position, right, with all of this experience being a founder, all of that stuff, right? When do you know it's time to follow trends or best practices and when it's time to really create them?
Yeah, I try to, like, it's very hard to make a wave, right? Like one out of a million companies can actually make a trend, and half the time they're really riding tailwinds. Like it's like it's right time, right place, right product, but it looks like they invented a trend. For me, more and more, like I'm looking at like, honestly, I'm not trying to do anything new. Like Swell AI, like people were doing content repurposing. Like they've been doing this for years, right? Like this is just like the classic playbook. All we're doing is saying, hey, we're taking that, we're just automating a portion of that work that previously like a person had to be doing. And so I think it's going to, also you can spend so much time looking for the trend that you're not like capitalizing on what's in front of you currently. Like I've seen so many companies do this where it's like, well, what's next? Well, what's next? Well, what's next? And in reality, like if they were just investing in what they were doing already and just doubled down on it, like that's going to make more business impact over the next like 12 to 24 months than them trying to find that next. Like I always, again, in the agency space, I'd always see this where they were always obsessed with like, what's that next thing? Like it's TikTok, right? And then that would be top of mind and the CEO would get obsessed with it. And then they're like all their team's focus, like they have these KPIs that they're supposed to be working on, but suddenly it's now focused on TikTok because, he read one blog post about how this is the future of, that's where Gen Z are doing searches or whatever, right? And so it becomes a distraction and it doesn't actually like accomplish the business goals. So I think a lot of the times, like I would always say, like, actually filter down. Like most companies, like if they do 2 channels really effectively, like they can do really, really well. Like pairing like SEO with email marketing, or pairing, Facebook ads with cold calling or whatever that is, right? It's those combinations of those types of things, like doing a couple things really effectively is most often like the best way to like do distribution. I think on the trend side, I would only adopt trends when it's apparent that it's like this is like AI is a technology, like a base technology shift, right? Like mobile was a base technology shift. Like mobile changed the entire way we interact with the world. AI is going to change the entire way we interact with the world. Those are the moments when we should like be like, oh, this trend is massive. It's not going away, right? And because of that, that's when it should be adopted. But you can chase all of these kind of like wild, all these different things. Like, I mean, everybody was like voice search is the future, and it was nobody was using voice search, but there was all this investment that happened in it. And that's a great example of like this distraction. Like if they just, doubled down on doing SEO, like traditional SEO, probably would have made more business impact than trying to ride this new wave that was being forced. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. But
yeah, it does. Thank you so much. Cody, really, thank you so much for sitting with us today. This has been incredible. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners will also find this just as valuable as I did. Really, thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks for having me, Bianca. Super excited to be here.
And that's a wrap on our enlightening conversation with Cody. Now, if your business is seeking a world-class digital agency, explore your options at designrush.com/marketplace. Here, you'll find a range of agencies tailored to make your project a success. Remember to like this video and subscribe for more inspiring discussions with industry leaders. Again, I'm your host, Bianca Mayer. Stay curious and join us for the next episode.